Hello. As promised, I'm making a video about this interview on Sky TV in which a woman called Indigo Rumbelow talks with Mark Austin about her activities with Just Stop Oil. Now, first of all, I think one has to be a little nervous of somebody with a name like that. I don't know what her parents were thinking of when they named her this, but you know what? It's quite possible that this is a name she has adopted afterwards, because Indigo Rumbelow is a bad combination to start with, and Indigo is just a terrible first name for anyone. So it could be that she's adopted that name. I don't know. Somebody's gone mad though. All right, well, that's just a sort of sociological side issue. Let's look at this. I took the liberty of checking up on Ms. Rumbelow. And this was in the Daily Mail, globe-trotting farmer's daughter who lectures the public on saving the planet. I don't actually agree with the way they're approaching this. I'll tell you why in a minute. The Just Stop Oil spokesman, I think that's supposed to be spokesperson, urged to stop screaming on live TV last night is a keen traveller racking up thousands of air miles when away from the stunning Welsh farm she grew up on, Mail Online can reveal today. Well, I suppose that's one way of undercutting her character. The fact is, it's quite possible, we can say, that she did a lot of globe-trotting and then saw the light and stopped globe-trotting. So going on what she did before, perhaps it's not entirely fair. Indigo Rumbelow, 28, appears to have travelled to Nepal twice since 2015. The activist who once glued herself to the M25 for Insulate Britain. You see how Insulate Britain and Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, indeed, they're all linked. They just have different names. There she was, and was Extinction Rebellion's arts coordinator, whatever that is, from northeast London, has also apparently enjoyed breaks in Sweden, Lithuania, Croatia, and other beauty spots abroad. Last night she was begged to stop shouting by Sky News veteran Mark Austin, who didn't do a very good interview in my opinion. I'm going to get to that in a little while. Miss Rumbelow was brought up at stunning £600,000 farmhouse with 35 acres of land close to the Gower Peninsula in South Wales, one of Britain's most beloved beauty spots. After leaving university, she worked in TV and movies as an art department runner on several productions, including the 2020 movie Misbehaviour, starring Keira Knightley. Okay, so she was in the arts world, wasn't she? However that defines her. But before dedicating herself to eco-protests, which has seen her arrested at least 6 times, the arts coordinator turned activist appears to have loved travelling. You see, I have spoken about this word activist. Revolutionary is more the word I would use to describe her. So they talk about holiday snaps from her Facebook page. So one critic branded her a hypocrite protester, while another said of her trip to Asia, I assume she walked there. I really hope she didn't fly, unless on a magic carpet, of course. Well, you see, as I said, this is in the past. We might have a different brainwashed person now. So I'm not sure that you could really call her a hypocrite. Only what she is doing is denying to others the experiences she had in her youth. And on that, I can say that she is being very selfish at the very least. Now, there was a little, there's her in the interview. And if you look at, I'll see if I can find it. There's an interview Roger Hallam did after he'd had an Insulate Britain protest. And the interviewer asked him a question and he had exactly this same look here. And it reminds me of a Russian pop song of probably the 80s. It was an underground group, as far as I remember, and they had a particularly catching part of their lyrics when they were talking about how much you could say and how much you could sing. And then something in the lyrics went something like, well, we can sing what we like, but lurking in the shadows, there are always the men with the concrete in their eyes. That's a wonderful image, and that's that.
I'd stay there.
You would?
Yeah.
And if it were an ambulance and there was someone that could potentially die in there, would you stay there?
Yeah.
It's the same expression, as far as I remember. I'll find a picture of it to compare, and you'll see what I mean. Okay, so they mentioned she comes from a well-to-do family. Well, yeah, it's always the well-to-do families who have the time for this sort of nonsense. And I'm trying to find a specific quote from her, so hang on a minute. Oh, here it is. 2 years ago, I went to my first mass action, protesting about the coal mining in a massive area of the Rhineland. That's in Germany, she mentions. Our group stopped a train from delivering to a power plant. Well, what do you know? And then we linked our arms and sat down on the train track. You have an adrenaline rush like you've never felt before. And I think in that quote, you have found exactly what she's doing, or the pleasure she gets from doing this. And that outweighs any inconvenience or dangerous behaviour that she's doing that will affect other people. She gets an adrenaline rush, and she probably gets an adrenaline rush from being arrested as well, and going on these mass action outings. Right, so that's her. There's just something else I wanted to say. This is a group of at least one set of people that she's involved with, and it seems to me there isn't quite enough diversity there. What do you think? We should definitely shut them down until there's a more diverse population among these protesters. Okay, so let's get on with this. I'm just going to play. It's an 11-minute video. I might skip some parts of it, but here goes.
On the M25 for a fourth day in a row this morning, the UK's busiest motorway had to be closed in 2 areas during rush hour as police officers attempted to remove protesters who had climbed onto overhead signs or gantries. We're joined now by Indigo Rumbelow from Just Stop Oil. Thanks for coming in.
Now, so far, so good. He set the scene, and now we have an interview. And this is more what she wants than anything else in the world. You could offer her a lottery win or an interview on national TV. She'd take the national TV because that's the adrenaline rush. She has become an adrenaline junkie. And the way she gets her fix is by trying to destroy our society, right? But I have to say, this is my opinion. I haven't proved anything. Okay, here we go.
I think you're achieving with these incredibly disruptive and also dangerous protests.
Hello. I'm sure you'll agree we're in an incredibly grave situation with the climate.
Right, now, she's speaking very reasonably and in a sort of slightly little girl voice. I hope you notice that. That's the soft side. The velvet in the glove that's in over the iron hand. All right, let's carry on. And then the first thing she said is, I'm sure you'll agree we're in a state of emergency here. Well, you know, I don't agree. And Mark Austin should not agree either. This has not been proven. And there are many scientists who say, no, this is not an emergency. This is natural fluctuations of the climate. Cold and hot. In the 70s, it was cold. Now it's hot. Okay.
Crisis. So Just Stop Oil has one simple demand, and that is that the UK government put an end to licensing new oil and gas in the UK.
Right. So this is simple. You can just tell everybody we can't use oil anymore. And that's simple. And this is the problem with such action, with such revolutionaries. They think that one answer will solve all our problems. It's very much like you get a family and there's one battered child in that family. There may be other children, but only one gets beaten up. And it's that child who is somehow upsetting the whole family. That child who is uniquely bad and causing all this trouble. And then when social services remove that child, it's funny, one of the other children suddenly becomes a victim as well. Then it's that child that's responsible. It's a sort of scapegoating type of attitude that everything that's wrong can be solved by getting rid of this particular pernicious influence. And that's a very simple and a very primitive attitude. And you notice she's using this little girl way of talking. Hang on, that drops pretty soon.
But I'm interested to know about these tactics. What evidence do you have that blocking the...
So you see, Mark Austin then he lets all these assertions she's making go past. He doesn't try arguing. He is actually arguing her case. And I'm very surprised. I mean, I'm not an experienced interviewer. I miss things all the time. I've done one interview and it was a disaster, but that's because I didn't realise what was going on. That was the first interview I'd ever done. This guy is a very good interviewer, or at least a very experienced one. And he's not jumping on this at all. You say that we're in a crisis. I can wheel out other scientists who say we're not. So why are you so sure that you can use these tactics, morally speaking, when the case really is not proven except somewhere inside your brainwashed head? Anyway, he doesn't do that. He just starts arguing about the tactics she's using, she and her colleagues.
Busiest motorway in the UK, causing endless disruption for tens of thousands of people, is actually achieving anything.
We need everybody to come to join us so we don't have to cause this type of disruption on the motorway.
Right, so what she's saying here is, if you're not with us, then we're going to carry on stamping our feet and holding our breath until we turn blue. This is two-year-old tactics, isn't it? It's a Violet Elizabeth tactics. In fact, she's even got the ringlets, hasn't she?
We need to be sat outside Parliament with tens and tens of thousands of people demanding an end to new oil and gas.
So she's saying that the tactics they're using are going to cause other people to join them. Well, it might cause a few people to join them, and then again, it might harden the resolve of others. It might, provided we could rely on our government and police to take care of us in this respect. The problem is, and this is always a fear that we must have at the back of our minds, I'm not sure that the government and the police are on our side. All right, let's carry on.
Yes, but you don't need to resort to this kind of disruptive behaviour, because it seems to me what people are talking about, Indigo, are your methods and not your message.
Now, there you are. You see, he is again arguing her case. What he is doing is telling her she's right, but her methods of publicity are wrong. And we don't know that she's right. I mean, the Just Stop Oil people could be right, but the oil business is more than what's going on in Britain. It's much worse, thousands of times worse in China and India. And that's where they should be demonstrating. But they won't do that. And they'll go and demonstrate in the Rhineland, where, again, they know the German police are not going to beat them up and rape them and throw them in jail for the next 30 years or more. No, they're going to do that in civilised places that already have a lot of very restrictive rules about what sort of pollution they can pour into the air. Whereas, say, for instance, in China, I think that's responsible. Have you seen the photographs of the pollution, the videos of pollution just billowing down the streets in big cities in China? That's where you have to worry. You've got to stop it there, not here. All right, let's carry on.
So your message is being completely lost because of the methods that you are using, which are infuriating people and disrupting life for so many people.
So the climate crisis is disrupting people around the world right now. And even here in the UK this summer, we saw the effects of the climate crisis with the UK getting 40 degrees heat. Now,
it's not entirely unusual for the UK to have hot years. I know a lot of people outside Britain seem to think that the weather is dreadful here, but it isn't that bad. And there are very hot summers as well. And that depends on atmospheric conditions, for instance, in the Sahara. So he is not taking issue with her over this. And this is the problem, that the elite, and here I'm including Mark Austin, because he is being a spokesman. I mean, while he's talking to her, he's got a microphone, an earpiece, in which there are people who are making suggestions about what refutations or information he will put into this conversation. And he is not, the assumption that we're in a climate crisis is there all the time. He is pushing this agenda. So it's not just her. I mean, she's just the violent end of it. It's Sky News as well.
Birds falling out of the sky and pensioners dying before they should.
Birds falling out of the sky, she just said there. Hang on, I think I cut that. Let's just go back on that. Let's see if I can find it.
Crisis with the UK getting 40 degrees heat and birds falling out of the sky and pensioners dying before they should. This is just...
as if she's worrying about pensioners. The pensioners who are dying before they should are the ones who can't get to hospital because of what she and her mates are doing. And I have not heard of birds falling out of the sky at all. Oh, except for a biblical thing where Moses was in the desert and the Israelites, or the Hebrews, or whatever they were called at the time, were complaining. I think they were complaining. They were fed up of the manna God was giving them. They wanted meat. So all these birds fell out of the sky. Quails, I believe. You see, climate change going about, 3,000 years ago? Now she should have been there at the time.
The beginning, and the climate crisis is going to get worse and worse and worse unless we act.
But we know,
we know
we cover that. We cover that on the news. We know all that. Yeah. I'm just talking.
We don't know all that, though. You see, he's arguing their case
about these tactics. The message you have, the message that you want to get across, get completely lost. I mean, your message is certainly lost on the woman who didn't get to hospital for her stroke treatment. Your message is certainly lost on the patient who didn't get to hospital for her cancer treatment appointment. And your message is also certainly lost on Tony Bambury, the man who missed his father's funeral. So I guess my question is,
By the way, I just want you to notice the change in her expression here. She's losing patience now. The fact that she gave her little girl argument, and then she expected him to accept what she said straight away, and he's still going on about the tactics, and she is starting to lose patience now. Look at that.
Is the point of doing it like this?
So it's very clear that the disruption will end as soon as the government issue this statement to stop new oil and gas. But we will have to continue.
Right, now I understand we live in a democracy, and that means we vote for the policies. Now, actually, we voted for a certain set of policies in 2019, and they seem to have been overturned rather. So maybe she has a point. Maybe she can force the government to change its policy. But I doubt it.
Because at the moment, I just do not know what else we're going to do. Do you have any other ideas of how we could get our government
it's not for me to give you
issue
ideas.
A statement to end new oil and gas? Because this isn't an issue of just green policy or just the climate protesters. It's an issue that's going to impact you. It's going to impact me. It's going to impact your children if you have children. And it's impacting people around the world.
So at this point, I said she's losing patience. I saw that in her face. I hadn't rehearsed this. So this is immediate impressions, more or less. I saw some of the video before, but this is more or less immediate impressions. I saw she was losing patience just then, and now that was a few seconds before she stopped listening to him altogether. Okay, I am interrupting myself again because I got so caught up in that interview I forgot to tell you who I was and give you some information about myself, so I'm going to do that now. I'm granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds, so if this channel disappears you'll know where else to find me. I'm also on Twitter, Gab and Parler, and it's on those platforms that I let you know when I've uploaded a new video. What else? Yeah, you can help my channel by liking this video. Click that like button and by sharing and by subscribing. And if you're watching this on YouTube, by checking that your subscription is still valid. It drops out occasionally on YouTube. Okay, you can also help me financially. Buy me a coffee or one of the other links in the description. Okay, back to the interview.
Government's decision to go ahead with new oil and gas with the full knowledge that this will kill millions of people is a complete act of betrayal on my...
I'll tell you, it will kill millions more if there is not enough oil powering, for instance, boats taking grain to various parts of the world.
But we're talking about here now the tactics that you are using. I mean, listen to what Tony Banbury said. These people have forced me not to go to my father's funeral. And it's not like I get a second chance. I will never forget what they have done, and I will never forgive what they have done. So my point again to you is that the way you are going about this means that people are not listening to the message. They are just talking about the method, and they don't like the method.
It's a very serious situation.
But we know that. Well, I'm talking about the tactics.
Again, he's arguing her case. We don't know that. That's the problem.
You are using. Listen to the police officer, Chief Constable of Essex. He says this: I think it is only a matter of time before somebody gets killed. The only way this is going to stop is if Just Stop Oil frankly grow up and realise that they are putting people's lives at risk. Doesn't he have a point that you need to grow up before someone gets killed? Because you're making your point, you can make your point in other ways.
So the way I see it, we're completely addicted to fossil fuels. Have you ever tried to ask someone to stop smoking?
She's addicted to the adrenaline. Now, I did hear this bit about smoking. Let's just listen to it.
Yes, look, I know.
So I've asked my dad to stop smoking, and that's because I loved him, yes? And he was told that if he keeps smoking, he's going to get cancer.
Yes.
And the scientists will tell him, you know, he's going to get cancer.
But how does
it's not very
hanging someone against
pleasant
it?
process.
Seriously.
No, one second. Could I just finish?
No, but we're
because
here
you're asking me about the
for you to-
disruption,
for you to
and I'm
justify
accepting
the
that.
disruption you're causing.
Yeah, I'm accepting that it isn't pleasant, and I'm accepting that we feel empathy for all of those people out there. But what we're trying to do is to get everyone to come together, to get our government to stop licensing new oil and gas in order to save life.
But there are ways of doing it that can avoid tens of thousands of people having their lives
just
completely
weeks ago,
disrupted.
a third of Pakistan was underwater.
Yeah, a third of Pakistan was underwater. And might this have something to do with corruption in the government? That is meaning that they are not controlling the rivers and providing proper canals and other waterways to take floods, which happen in Pakistan all the time. It has nothing to do with that, has it? With corruption and cronyism and a little bit of maybe religious fatalism as well. No, it's all because of petrol.
The rains have failed in Somalia for the 5th year in a row, meaning mothers cannot feed their children.
But we know that, and we covered that. We had correspondence.
Right, again, he's arguing her case. The rains may have failed in Somalia. They fail regularly in places in Africa. They always have. That doesn't mean to say there's an emergency, but what Somalia could do is ensure a supply of water, clean water, which is possible if there weren't so much corruption there. If they did this in Somalia, saying stop corruption, that would probably be more constructive, except the Somali governments would make short shrift of them, wouldn't they?
Out there is a COP27 conference.
You may have been covering it, but the media has failed to make political change.
Hang on, we've got...
Politics has failed us. I'm 28.
Okay, politics have failed. No. What she's saying here is that we can't rely on the politicians. And yes, indeed, to some extent, we can't. But what she's saying here is, because we can't rely on politicians, we have to have mob violence instead. That's the only answer. Instead of going into politics and trying to make politics work, which is slower and less adrenaline rich, she's saying, here, mob violence.
This is the 27th COP conference, and what has happened every single...
Yeah, it's... Do you think the COP conference is of any use at all? No, it's a junket. We know that. That COP conference, all the other COP conferences, they're total nonsense. And they're ways for politicians to virtue signal. That's all. So she's right that the COP conferences aren't worth anything. But that's not what I'm talking about.
The emissions have risen and risen and risen.
Little girl, gone.
If we're doing your job properly, everyone would be out on the streets.
So we have
but they're not.
So
and I really want you to understand.
No,
do you know how grave the situation is?
I do understand.
And do you have children?
I've got children.
And do you love those children?
Indigo, please, I understand the point you're making. You are here today to justify the tactics. You're
Again, he's arguing her case.
You love those children more than you love fossil fuels.
You are committing a crime.
Right, there you are. That's called the fallacy of black and white, by the way. You know, you've got one that's sort of like somebody saying to the waiter, this soup's too hot, and then the waiter's saying, well, do you want it stone cold? It's the fallacy of black and white.
That's what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to side with young people who are asking...
Why should we side with young people when they're like this? Well, she's not that young anymore either. But what young people, I regard as people maybe under the age of 20, maybe, have very little experience of life, and in general, for young people, all sorts of issues are black and white because they haven't learnt yet about that fashionable word, nuances, what I would call shades of grey, but unfortunately that's been rather co-opted by a novel, hasn't it?
Our government very politely, in line with the UN, saying that we need to come off fossil fuels.
Okay. That's one point.
With the knowledge that we're going to go over 1.5 degrees and this will undermine the rule
Indigo.
of law. We're asking to...
And they're not undermining the rule of law. Of course they are. We're going to make mob violence here until you change the laws according to us. That undermines the rule of law.
Stop shouting at me, Indigo.
To just...
Look, you are breaking the law. Your protests are law-breaking. Why should you be allowed to interfere with the rights of ordinary, law-abiding people going about their daily business? That's the question I'm asking.
Let's me and you, we can come together, we'll put a referendum up and it'll say, would you like to destroy much of life on Earth, including everything you know and love, or would you like to not? Would you like your government to insulate your house, give you an affordable public transport system, tax the polluters who are making money off people who are starving and cold and hungry in their homes this winter? What do you want to do? So destroy everything we know and love.
Why are you at COP27 making this point? Why are you at COP27? That is the forum.
Destroy everything you know and love,
this point.
Or not.
There are more oil...
No, COP27 isn't the forum. He's making her argument. COP27 and all the other COPs are totally useless virtue signalling exercises. And the fact that he's bringing it up, it weakens his argument, and it's just arguing for her.
Lobbyists at COP27, then there are people like you. Why aren't you there making your point?
Yeah, and back to this idea. Isn't that disgusting?
Why do you...
Imagine that. Think about my dad when he was smoking. Imagine if the cancer research invited Benson and Hedges into their, debate on what they're going to do about lung cancer.
Indigo, answer me.
Well, I can't argue with that.
What do you achieve?
It's disgusting.
Well, I haven't asked the question yet. Answer me.
Outraged middle classness. It's disgusting. Oh, Margot Dumont and the beads. That's about the level she's at now.
What do you achieve by attacking things people hold dear? Things people hold dear.
Yeah,
like works of art.
Yeah.
Like statues. What do you achieve by that, honestly?
Yeah, you've asked me a very reasonable question.
What do you achieve by that?
So we've been disrupting the art galleries. We've been disrupting football matches. We've been disrupting the M25. And we're saying the media is not doing their job properly and they're not telling you the truth about what's coming.
Well, the media certainly aren't doing their job properly. Judging from the way Mark Austin is conducting this interview, because they are not giving the other side. There is another side. Yes, we do have to stop polluting the air. But again, in Britain, we're one of the lowest polluting nations in the world. China is responsible for a huge percentage of the world's pollution. I'm not giving a figure because I haven't looked it up, but it's impressively enormous. And that's where people like her should be starting. But yeah, that's far too difficult, isn't it?
Down the line.
Listen,
the governments are not acting. So we need people to come together, face up to the truth that we're going to pass over this threshold of 1.5 degrees of warming. We're going to plummet towards total destruction.
Indigo, we have climate programmes. So go on.
She's just making assertions, I hope you realise.
Climate programmes and talk about that. Go to COP27 and talk about that. But there are people across this country who are fed up with having their lives disrupted by your people. And if you want to talk about what Just Stop Oil is, what is Just Stop Oil? Just Stop Oil, what, now? When? How soon do you want to just stop oil?
That's a really good...
At last.
Because the economy, it seems to me, and I'm sure you'll agree, is driven. Economies around the world are driven by oil. So when do you want to stop
We will
oil?
agree there are more things that are important than the economy, won't we?
Would you agree then?
No. The one thing that Bill Clinton came up with that was of any philosophical use at all was, it's the economy, stupid. When people can't put food in their mouths and in the mouths of their children, society breaks down. That's when society breaks down.
Could I just tell you, because it was a good question.
By 2050 enough for you?
So
is that net zero by 2050
let me explain the demand, because I think you'll find it very, very reasonable. All we are doing, in order to stop the disruption, the government would have to say, we're going to stop issuing the 130 new licences for drilling in the North Sea, and we're going to say no to the pending coal mine decision.
But
and we've got 7 years of...
So, and then we become energy dependent on somewhere like Russia. Yeah? Again, and the way we use oil in this country is the least polluting systems in the world. Whereas in somewhere like India, any Indian street is just full of oil pollution. You can smell it in the air there. Now, why isn't she there telling them to sharpen up their act?
So my question to you then is, why do you have to go and hang off gantries above the busiest motorway in Britain? You've said it. I mean, the other thing you said...
Let's get Rishi Sunak in here and say, you've got rid of some of Truss's toxic legacy. One second. He put fracking away. He said, oh, what a silly idea. She's brought in this new fracking. Well, now he needs to say, I have an opportunity here to go to the COP conference and say, Britain is going to lead the way.
Indigo.
We're going to stop drilling for new oil.
Why the hell should we lead the way? We're already leading the way. How much further forward do you want to get? What, leading the way into poverty and social breakdown?
Said in a newspaper the other day, in order to protect your freedom, your rights, and all that you love, will you stand with us? Now, it seems to me that what you're doing on these motorways and what you're doing to cause the police no end of problem, and what you're doing in risking your lives as well as people's lives on the motorway, people are not going to come and stand with you. How do you expect people to come and stand with you if you are disrupting their lives to this extent? It doesn't take this to get your message across.
OK, so if it wasn't for women like the suffragettes, I wouldn't have a vote. I couldn't...
Does anyone think she makes good use of her vote? Just saying.
Own anything, I don't think. Every right and liberty that we have, your working rights, my rights to vote as a woman, they have been fought for. They weren't just handed down by people down from those with power. They were fought for. And every single one of those liberties that is at risk because of the climate.
Actually, that's not strictly true. Like, for instance, the movement to abolish slavery, it didn't require ladies and gentlemen of the early 1800s to disrupt Parliament in any way. They just held meetings in church halls, and they gave out leaflets, and they lobbied their MPs, and they got the laws changed with respect to slavery. And the same amounts to women's rights. Although women didn't have the vote, there were many laws that were passed during especially the late 19th century, which gave women more, for instance, property. She says she wouldn't be able to own property. Well, yes, the Married Women's Property Act came out, I don't remember, it must have been about the 1860s, I can't remember exactly now. So I'm not entirely sure that the suffragettes, apart from the meetings and what you might call the consciousness raising sessions, I'm not sure that a lot of what they did, the more disruptive things they did, actually helped. Also, you have to carry people with you. For instance, in Iran right now, there is a revolution going on where women are taking off their headscarves. And that would not be possible. That sort of mass demo would not be possible if the men weren't along with them. So you have to say there's a social movement there that is, it's not just a group, it's the whole society that is disagreeing with what's happening, what the government is saying. So here we have a situation where she said the suffragettes gave women the vote, when it was probably a lot of society going along with them at the time. I'm not saying they weren't completely unnecessary. I'm sure that the meetings they held made a difference, but I'm not sure that the more violent tactics they held did make a difference. But she obviously thinks they did.
Okay. Indigo, Rumbelow, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, this is the news hour at 6.
Right, okay. Well, yeah, that's my analysis of the video. What I might do is I might cut some. So if you see cuts, it's just for the sake of time. I also forgot to give you my station identification. So what I'm going to do is say goodbye to you now, and then I'm going to record the usual stuff about granniopteryx, and then I'm going to insert it in the middle of the video. Right, there you are. Well, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbow with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.